Today is 12th June 2019, which happens to be World Day Against Child Labor. Now, child labor in Uganda, we ask the question, who's to blame for the increasing cases of this child labor within the country? Because a report that was released last month revealed the fact that the world has made a number of strides when it comes to protecting children, but Uganda lags behind on a few things, one of them being child labor. Now this year, the International Labour Organization is celebrating 100 years of advancing social justice and promoting decent work. Yet today, as we mark the World Day Against Child Labor, 152 million children are still in child labor. Launched in 2002 to focus on attention against child labor and the action needed to eliminate it, the day is observed today, every year. Now, taking a look at what this year's theme is, children should not work in fields but on dreams. The theme focuses on the development of children working in agriculture sector throughout the world, as around 152 million children, as I had mentioned earlier, still are in child labor. Now, as it is said, the UN Sustainable Development Goal Target 8.7 was set by the international community to make an end to child labor by 2025. We're in 2019. How much progress has been registered so far? Taking a look at Uganda and combating child labor. Now, I am joined by Mr. Damon Wamara, who is the country director of Dwelling Places. Welcome to Morning at NTV.
Thank you very much.
And to have this conversation, we see just in a few months ago, we had KCCA passing the ordinance, which makes sure that if I decide to give money to a child, there's a fine on my end. I could even be arrested. That is just a stride now. But Dwelling Places has been a part of these conversations and has even been a part of just that ordinance. Now, talking about the activities of Dwelling Places, where do you stand when it comes to the fight against child labor in Uganda?
Well, the situation on child labor in Uganda is really, really wanting. And as a nation and as parents, we need to be very, very alarmed at the situation. When you look at the children who are on the streets, when you hear about the children that are in the mines, when you hear about the children that are in the different places where they're being exploited, it really disheartens, and it can break. If you're a parent, you just are moved to see what are we doing to ensure that we have a future, we have a heritage that is going to continue our lineage and push and just keep us alive through living on. Because the children who are exploited, taken for housemaids, those who are taken to be cattle keepers, those who are used in the rice fields, especially in the eastern part of Uganda, those who are in the mines. I've been told that there are over 1,000 children who are working in the mine fields, especially Katwe, where the salt mining is. There are over 1,000 children. It really is disheartening. What are we doing about it? How much can we do to make a change? And as Dwelling Places, though the problem is large, we are called to work with those children who are being exploited, especially on the streets.
That is here in Kampala.
That is here in Kampala, but in other districts we're offering support to the local governments to see how they can be also able to address the issue about children who are living on the streets and who are being taken advantage of, the children who are being used to collect scrap, the children who are being forced to go to the streets to beg, not for their own benefit, but for somebody else's benefit. Those girls that are being sent to the market to sort out beans, not for them, but for somebody else.
Yes. Now, when you mention the fact that it's not only in Kampala, because for a number of us, we only seem to be seeing it here in Kampala while you're in traffic jam and there's this child who's begging, or this child is simply trying to sell to you an item. Now, yesterday, leaders in Busia raised their worry about the rising number of children engaged in child labor there. Many children between the age of 10 and 17 are engaged in activities like fishing, mining, as Mr. Wamara has mentioned, and even smuggling of goods across the Uganda-Kenya border. Let's take a watch.
Nensomba amazi nensombera abantu amazi ne bampa ku lunaku nsobola okufuna oba 13 oba 14.
We discourage that, and we've tried our efforts. Some parents have gone against that, and you find that they are putting the life of these children at risk.
The parents are not sensitized in the way that they don't know their roles. They just bear children and drop there, not knowing that they are supposed to take them to school.
During market days in Kenya, children don't come to school. As of now, we have actually started arresting all those. We have started arresting all those who are promoting child labor, and we shall not spare anybody.
Now, Mr. Omara, one thing that is highlighted in what we have just listened to and taken a watch is that parents have a role to play. We will say that there are a number of rings and leaders that are making sure that these children come from wherever they do and are sent to become housemaids, sent to be on the street, but there's the parent. And you mentioned heritage earlier, where the parent could have had the mindset that the more children I have, the more labor I have. We live in a culture where children are seen as a source of labor. So taking a look at the parent's role, a parent who's watching at this point in time.
The first thing I want to say is that the first place for protecting a child is not the government. It is not the schools. The first place a child should feel protected is in their family. It is the role of us parents to protect our children, to make sure that our children are not exploited, our children are in safe places, our children are actually getting a skill, whether it is in education or in vocational skills, whichever way. But it is our job to ensure that we are empowering our children to be able to protect themselves and to be able to thrive as a child. So the parents have a key role. They have the major role. And that even is seen when a child goes to school. It is said that a child is educated 20% at school and 80% at home.
So who does the education of the parents? Because we shouldn't sit here and assume that, you know, a number of people, when they choose to have children, have all these roles stipulated down for them and they know them. Yeah. Some of them don't really know them. They happen to be parents.
Well, and I think one of the biggest issues we've had in Uganda currently is the degrading parenting that is happening. But I want to remember that we had also a rich culture system in our country where parenting was done through watching your parents. I mean, I saw how my mother and my father helped me grow up. I saw how they would send me to my uncle, they would send me to my aunties. I had this different rich culture of the different, whether my mother's side or my father's side, and all that was instilled into me on how to offer love and protection for my child. I saw how much my mother ensured that she fought all ways to ensure that I had an education. I saw how my mother ensured that we had a meal to eat at the table. There was no clear-cut lesson on parenting, but there was that knowledge that was passed down, the formal knowledge that was passed down. My mother promised that I would not go to work at all. I would need to concentrate on an education so that I'm skilled and empowered enough to be able to provide. And from that, I'm now also carrying out the same thing. And now I am also doing the same thing to my two children that I have.
So when we go to, in case the roles are misplaced, and in comes dwelling places, that is helping a number of these children.
Yes.
Taking it to what happens when a child is brought into dwelling places, how they're brought there.
The stories that we hear about the children, the stories that the children give us when they come into the home are very hurting. You'll hear of how a parent would say that you're not my child, disowning the child. You've been with the child for 5 years, 10 years, and then all of a sudden you're saying, you're not my child. You hear people, you hear the stories of how they're being beaten, how they're being poured water on. There's one child I interacted with who literally saw her father killing her mother. And he's saying, now you want to take me back to my father? Mm-hmm. What do you do with that? And the child has decided to come to the streets to fend for himself, and now is being exploited. Where the first place would have been for the father to ensure that the family is protected. But look, we are also seeing a number of the families that we're working with, they're increasingly being the single families. There is, the father figure is not there, the mother figure is not there. You end up finding that at times we end up presenting ourselves as their father figure, as their mother figure, and that is because they need someone to look up to. They need someone to protect them. They are children.
When we talk about them being children, and if at all the family foundation is shaken, a few things are shaken with it. Sure. This year's theme is children should not work in fields, but on dreams. We're in a country where agriculture should be one of our forefront bits of things. And we have children who actually, after they go to school, they come home and they either go to, or before they go to school, they first go to the garden. One of those two has to happen, but the garden is one of the places. Taking a look at this theme and bringing into light Fresh Kid. We had this conversation at the start of the year, and a number of people were saying there wasn't really something there. He's just a boy who needs to be managed, that's all. But he highlights, and he is one of those children who shows that we have families who are surviving on the child working.
Exactly. And what happened at the end? The father comes in after being lost for a long time. It's a dilemma. It just shows the kind of confusion we have in our country. But when you think about the children working in the fields and going to school, that is where the balance needs to be to come into place, because I agree that the child needs to be skilled and empowered to learn that it's not just an easy thing, go to school and learn something. I mean, my mom made sure that we knew how to cook. My mom made sure that we knew how to wash our clothes. Sometimes when she was constructing a house, we were the supervisors of those houses. There were ways she was passing on skills to us. And we need to do the same thing. But she was also mindful, and we also need to be mindful that all the experience, all the things that we want to give to the child, even in nurturing their gifting, needs to be done in a certain realm. It needs to be, I mean, the child needs to first go to school, get empowered, learn how to mix with other people, and then come and then build on the skills. So that balance needs to be struck, where they can be able to work in the fields, yes, but what work is also.
So what work should they be doing?
According to the law, the Children's Act, the Act says and states that children should be protected from any economic and harmful labor that is not of benefit to them, that will cause a psychological torture to them, that will cause a physical torture to them. So the work, the kind of work that you give, needs to be in consideration and needs to be supervised. Even though the law allows a child to work from 16 years, it actually says a child can work from 16 years under supervision, which means that there is a caution there that, understanding the situation we're in and our culture, a child from 14, 15, 16 needs to begin to learn the world out there, but it needs to be in a protected situation. So if they're to work, they will go to work, yes, but school should be the priority. Skills empowerment should be the priority. We have the holidays. Let's use the holidays to go digging. Let's use, there are all those opportunities that we can always use. We don't have to use this one way of always getting that. But that balance needs to be struck, and also the parents need to be helped to understand that it is not the child's role to provide for the family. It is the father and the mother's role to provide and to protect the child from any form of exploitation.
Okay. Now, as we have this conversation, we cannot ignore the fact that we also have to bring the child into the conversation.
Sure.
There is the government, there are the organizations that help the government. Then there's also the public. At this point in time, I have a role to play. As a community, if I see something going wrong and I say, I think this child is being exploited, I should speak up. We have also the police, but there's also the child. Now, Dwelling Places has been able to save a number of children from child labor. And we're going to be having this conversation with David Rukasi, who is with two children who are a part of child labor at some point, but Dwelling Places has been able to help them and get them back on track of making sure that they get to enjoy their childhood. So over to you, David.
Well, good morning. It's a very, very sad situation when you have a child that should be living a life like any other child, having to go through what they have to go through. And with me here, I have Lomilo Magdalene and Lomiria Mark. These are two children that have been involved in that unfortunate place where, as children, they have been forced to get into a space that they shouldn't. And they're here to share their experience with us. And of course, to protect them, we have decided not to expose and show their faces. So we hope that you understand that. I'll start with you, Magdalene. Good morning. How are you?
Morning to you, sir.
You're fine?
I'm fine.
Well, how old are you now?
I'm 15 years.
15.
Yeah.
What class are you?
Form 3.
Almost a candidate.
Yeah.
You're going to nail this.
Yes.
Okay, good. So tell us your story. Tell us your story. How did you get into child laboring? How did you end up there? What happened?
Okay, for me, do you know children can be also trafficked for forced labor? I was in Karamoja with my parents. So, like, not that other people can traffic, but also our relatives can traffic you. I had my aunt. She used to stay in Kampala. She came at our home in Karamoja. She told my mom, she was like, I can pay fees for that girl. I can provide everything. Then we called. My mom said, after all that, I don't have money. And I don't have money to pay for your fees. Let's go. We went. When we reached at Kampala, I was so surprised. The woman told me, do you know what you're going to do? You're going to go at Owino Market and sort beans. So I was like, I don't know even how to sort. I've never done that.
How old were you then?
By then I was in P5.
P5?
Yeah.
Okay.
Then actually I was schooling, but since she took me, then I went, she was like, we go to Owino Market, we look for somewhere, we look for a job. But she took me to sort beans. But at the end of the day, they were giving me like 4,000. Every day? Every day. Then we were staying at Kato with her. So I started sorting beans for like for 2 weeks. Then like I got exhausted. It's like I got fed up. The job was too hard for me. So what I did, I went to the streets in order to get out of that after all, she doesn't give me food. I'm the one, after working, where I work, not that they give me food, that very money is the one I have to use in order to get something to eat. So I had to go back home to use that very money. Very money to get something to eat. And I have to give her the money which I have worked, yet I'm the one who was worked.
So for her, she used to stay home, and for you, you go and work?
I don't know whether she used to stay, but for me, she got for me a job that you're going to sort beans.
Was this during holidays or during your...
No, during school, because she lied my mom that, you're going to study.
So you were not studying this whole time?
Yeah, I never studied for the whole year. So what I did, I went to the streets. And when I went to the streets, but I was going to the street, do you know what? I was like, Aunt, I'm fed up of doing that job. Let me at least go to the street and I beg money instead of bothering myself to do something which I can't do. Okay. Then when I went to the streets, I spent like 1 month without going to the school. Then there is the projects. They used to come at the street, but when we are still there, but for me I was just doubting. What if I accept? They may do something to me, which like my auntie did to me. Yeah. Then like DP members came. They were like, they're going to take you to school. I was happy, but when I went and told my aunt, she was like, are you serious? Are they the one who brought you from the village? No, you're the one. I was like, you're the one who brought me. Actually, I can't go.
Yeah. So how did you get saved from all this? How did you come out?
Like when I went to the streets, I used to beg money, and I used to take. By then, Kale, they used, and whenever you see a white person, this Vazungu,
yes,
when you see them,
you go to the window.
Car. Actually, you go to the window. Uncle, I need 1,000. Actually, they may give you when you find someone who is
Yeah.
with sympathy,
Yeah.
actually may give you on like 50,000.
Like 50,000.
Yeah.
Wow.
When they gave me that money, I went to my aunt straight. That very day I was very happy. I went to my aunt. Do you know, aunt? I've got this money. She was excited. She told me, do you know what? You're going to continue going to the street instead of going for what? For work. Me too, I got somehow.
Because you had gotten some good money.
Yeah, better than the other one,
Yeah.
which I had first. So she told me, do you know what? You keep on going.
So when
Keep
you get
on
the money
going.
on the streets, where do you take it? You take it to her?
Yeah.
Wow.
And she never even sent like some money to my mom. But she was for our benefit.
Yeah.
Then when I reached, there is a time when I reached Banai, because I spent a year without schooling. Yet actually when I was trafficked, I was violated, and I dropped out of school because that very year I didn't study. So then there is a certain lady called Aunt Betty in Dwelling Places. She was somehow like knowing our language, Karamojong language. She explained to me that, do you know what, girl? Because I had some little English. Okay. She told me that what? You're going to be helped. That we are going to take you to Dwelling Places and we are going to make you go back to school.
Okay.
I was like,
So that's how you made your journey to Dwelling Places.
Yeah.
How do you find Dwelling Places?
Actually, the project was really fine, and everything which I never had, I got it by that very time. Because they took me even when I was angry. But when I reached there,
You became
actually,
happy.
food was the first to be given to me.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. Let me talk to this young man here as well. Ugamba oti oli bulungi?
Bulungi sewa.
Kati gwe bakutubwa kujja wa?
Nze nange wanzija Karamoja.
Wava Karamoja?
Ye.
Ani yakujja Karamoja?
Yali musajja.
Musajja yakusanga Busanzi n'akujjayo?
Nedda yajja ew'abazadde bange.
N'akusabayo?
N'ansabayo n'aŋŋamba nti ngenda soma mu Kampala. Bwe natuuka, twatuuka kale ng'ayina yasooka n'ambeera ya bulungi. Naye bwe twatuuka nga ssente zimuweddeko, n'atandikawo bizinesi ya paani.
Eya paani?
Kati nga mpanze n'entwala.
Gwe n'otunda?
N'entunda. Nenzija ku street nga ngenda awo Jinja Road we nalinga nga ntunda paani. Kati waliwo olunaku lumu nali mutunda, empulira ng'enjala ennuma. Nga sowa mulyako ankuba kibooko. Kati awo n'entunda paani n'enzirayo, naye nga nsigazzaamu obupaani bubiri. N'aŋŋamba lwaki byasigazzaamu, n'ankuba. Olunaku olulala saalinda kukeera, ne ngenda ku street. Naye nga namalamu emyezi 2.
Mu paani? Otunda paani?
Awo nali mu Pitu. Kati nga egyo emyezi 2 saasoma. Kati kusoma gye nagenda, edda kaŋŋambe nti we nagenda ku street nga nkooye embeera
ey'okutunda paani.
Kale nenjoyininga groups nga babeera awo wansi, awo nga ku rock awo awali railway. Awo kanentandika obeerayo. Naye olunaku olumu nali mpita mu kibuga nga kale neekubye nga njagala kuddayo ewa oyo omusajja nga neya street embeera sinnungi. Neŋŋenda, ekirungi waliwo abazungu abaali bazze, ne bampandiika ne bawandiika oyo omusajja nga muzadde wange. Naye mu kusooka yali tayagala ŋŋende. Kati ne bantwala ku dwelling. Ekyasooka okunkolebwa, basooka kuntwala mu ddwaliro.
Okukebera olabe obuli bulungi.
Nebankeberawo oba nkyali bulungi.
Kati owulira otya? Dwelling Places ogyagala? Oli mu class ki?
Senior 1.
Oli mu senior 1? Onyumirwa obulamu kati? Tosobola kuddayo ku street?
Sisobola. Sisobola.
Oba oyagala kuddayo kutunda paani? tekisoboka ekyo. Kale webale bambi okujja okutubuulirako ku story eyo. Thank you very much. Talking to these two young fellas that have gone through that unfortunate bit in life where they have been trafficked into child labor. The lady here was on the streets, the young man here was on the streets as well. She was picked from her family in pretense that the person picking him is going to bring him to Kampala and put him into school. And that wasn't the case when they got to Kampala. They ended up in selling pancakes for his case. Madam here ended up sorting beans, and then later on resulted that it was too much for her. She went to the streets, and that's how many of these kids are ending up on the streets. But thanks to Dwelling Places that has come to their rescue, and now they are very happy children living a life that every child should live. Let me take you back to Rita, and we can have more of this talk. But it's very, very nice to talk to these young people and knowing that they came through it. Rita, this is. When you hear this story, it's a very saddening bit, because we have been children before. There are very many children out there, and you'd be thinking, who in their rightful sense could do this to a child?
Well, David, it's quite disturbing, and those two represent a number of children whose story seems to not have been brought to the forefront, but they share it and helps us understand how exactly these children end up there. Now, Dwelling Places, after these children come into their care, eventually get these children back to their caretakers, and they go back to school and try to enjoy a childhood. And that usually, we can't erase the fact that this is now a part of this child. It's in them. There's a history that they now have within them from their experience on the street. So how do you, because this psychologically affects them. So the psychological aspect of it, Mr. O'Mara.
Well, what happens is that first of all, the two children you have listened to are children who have gone through our program. And we run a 4-hour program where we rescue the children, rehabilitate them, and the rehabilitation is a holistic approach of psychosocial support and counseling and healthcare and rehabilitation in its own essence, and catch-up education too. That's why we're able to make sure that the children can be able to go back to school. But these children that you've seen, the reason why they're able to say that they are being trafficked is because they've also been empowered to be able to identify. These two children have volunteered to be advocates, to be able to speak out and share their story so that no other child should go through what they have gone through. And so the rehabilitation is what helps them, empower them to ensure that they can build a resilience with whatever situation they are faced with. And also they know who to report to when they get into situations of need. And that is... then when they are deemed fit to go back and fit back into the community, we also go to the families and empower them to understand what they did and whatever caused the separation. We ensure that we empower them to be knowledgeable about it, and once the environment is deemed safe for the child, we place the child back in. But the secret for our working with over 1,600 from when we started and having a 85% no return of children back to the streets, the secret is simple: education.
Okay, education, empowerment, as you have mentioned as well. And simply with those two, we believe we can be able to be on track with the theme this year, which is children should not work in fields but on dreams. Now, I have been joined by the country manager of Dwelling Places. You had one of the children say DP. That is it. That is Mr. Damon Wamara. And one thing he did highlight as we wrap this up is there will be a walk from the 1st of July to the 18th of July.
Yes.
From Uganda to Karamoja.
From Kampala to Karamoja.
From Kampala to Karamoja.
And our instances, we want to create more awareness of the fact that these children are being brought and are being exploited, and we want many people, including those who are on that route, to understand that these children are not supposed to be exploited. They're supposed to be protected.
Yes, so on this day, which is the World Day Against Child Labor, let's remember to ensure that children do have a childhood and let them enjoy the childhood. That has been our conversation for Take Note. We'll be taking a short break and getting into a business update later on.